celebration, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm privileged to be able to welcome you all to the Freedom Embassy. If you're joining us in person, hello. It's so wonderful to see all of you. And if you are joining us online, watching or listening in, welcome to the One Big Beautiful Bash. It feels really good to be here because after months of tireless work and dedication and coordination, we can finally celebrate the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And this is a transformative and generational piece of legislation. So I want to start by saying thank you, a very heartfelt thank you to the activists who are here with us in this room and the thousands of people who are watching us right now online. Thank you for your activism over the past entire year. This would not have happened without your work. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. It is truly because of you that Congress took action. That Congress took action to make these tax cuts permanent. That was so important, and I'm sure we're going to end up talking about it today. That makes this the most pro-growth tax package possible, and that empowers Americans to pursue their version of the American dream, which is what we stand for here at Americans for Prosperity, of course. But this is more than just a bill. This is a bold step towards a future where words like limited government, economic freedom, prosperity for all, these aren't just the principles that we believe in. These are the policies that we've helped deliver for our fellow Americans. It's incredible. So I know we're going to have a lot of great conversation today. We're going to talk about how this bill reduces the tax burden and provides certainty and confidence to individuals and job creators across the country. But I want to just say this doesn't happen without the work of this team. And so let's talk a minute about what that work looked like, right? Americans for Prosperity, the Libre Initiative, and Concerned Veterans for America put together the largest outside effort to advocate for the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so that turned into things like 750 events and rallies across the country with activists and lawmakers and job creators talking about the benefits of this bill. That looked like 1 million voter contacts, knocking doors, calling our fellow citizens to advocate for this bill in targeted districts and targeted states at critical moments in the journey of this bill. That looked like 1,500 meetings on Capitol Hill with lawmakers and their staff. And days of action, national days of action timed in May and June, and key inflection points where we rallied our communities to show Congress the grassroots enthusiasm behind getting this package done. Looked like consistent partnership with congressional leaders and millions of dollars in digital ads, targeted ads, and testimonials from real Americans talking about what this bill would mean for them. Now those people in those testimonial ads and millions of Americans are going to start to feel the positive impact of the work that you all have done. And you know, families are going to be able to keep more of their hard-earned money. Job creators are going to have the confidence to invest and grow their businesses and invest in their communities and their employees. So we want to get into all of that. I'm thrilled to have Guy and Katie here with us because they've been part of this fight since the very beginning. But I'm very honored to get to bring to the stage the first of many policy champions that we were thrilled to be able to work with to get this bill through Congress, because he's from my home state of Minnesota, the House Majority Whip, Tom Emmer.
Well, Congressman, it's so good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. I want to start by digging into what you experienced behind the scenes, because, I mean, for months, when I would have members on my show almost every day, House or Senate, I would ask, is this actually going to get done? And it was a genuine curiosity because with the tiny microscopic margins you guys had to work with and any sort of element gets out of calibration, you've got all sorts of cascading potential problems. And the answer was always, we have to get it done, but people were a little bit nervous to make any bold predictions. So as you were going through this process, one of your top jobs is to whip votes. I can imagine you're whipping votes, counting votes, losing sleep week after week. What were some of the big moments where maybe you thought, maybe this thing could be slipping away? What were some of the key moments where you started to realize, okay, I think we're going to get everyone, or at least enough people, on board?
Well, you and I got to get to know each other better, Guy, because I never, ever have any doubt. You point at the left field wall and you swing for the wall. The problem with this town is everybody's trying to cover their backside all the time. They want to be right when it doesn't work, and they want to be taking the credit when it does work. And in the whip's office, we take a different approach. It's a promise that Donald Trump made to the American people, and we're going to make sure that it happens, and we did. By the way, I'd be remiss. I had no idea that Emily and I have similar roots. We come from the same town.
Hockey Town, USA.
Yeah, great to be with you. And I got to call out, I already saw Maria Voigt, who's here somewhere.
Over there.
Yep, thanks for your work in Minnesota. And our friend Jake Coleman, who's done so much work for AFP in our state in Minnesota, is watching somewhere with a watch party.
Can I interrupt you for a second and brag on Maria for a moment? Out of the 1 million doors that we knocked, Maria was responsible for 49,000 of WOW.
Wow. But getting back to your question, it comes down to once it was a long process. You got to remember that in the House, this didn't start at the beginning of the year. This started last year. Mm-hmm. We actually, with our leadership group, Mike Johnson, Steve Scalise, and myself, Scalise actually started with the committees like a year ago, April. This is what we're going to do because, as Mike Johnson will tell you, we fully expected to win in the election and that Donald Trump was going to be in the White House. And we will argue to you that back in 2016, people weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for a Donald Trump victory. This time we wanted to be. So you got to give the credit to that leadership of getting that moving. And then once it got moving, it was literally Donald Trump saying, this is what I promised in the campaign. This is what I want done. And we had already done the work. Think about this. I think there were 4 committees involved. Somebody can correct me, but I think there were 4 committees involved back in 2017 when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were done. We had 11 committees writing pieces of this bill, unheard of. And the first big thing was the budget resolution. Man, I lost more blood on that one. And it's a great argument to be having within the Republican conference. It's all about the debt and the deficit, or reverse it, the deficit and the debt. We're spending too much money and we have too much debt. The fight was about tax cuts. Our rules say you got to pay for these on our side. The Senate, and I know you'll have Whip Baraso here, God bless those guys. They have different rules. They're allowed to use this current policy baseline. But we had this fight over on our side between those that were okay with the current policy baseline if it came back permanent using that approach, and those who were not okay with that. So we had to overcome that. It was I like to say, we are not a family. We are a team. You put a group of people on a field with the same jersey on the first day, they're not a team. You need to let them run into each other. You got to give them a plan. That was the beginning, and we started to learn. It's called a little muscle memory that you learn. But each one, Guy, got more difficult. And by the way, when we did what they said we could never do, the victory was so sweet.
And by the way, just a quick follow-up, because you mentioned the involvement of all those committees. Was part of the thought process there having more buy-in from people, so it's not just like a top-down process? People feel like they actually had a hand in the building of the bill?
Yeah, I think what you've seen over the last decade, obviously that's the time I've been here, so that's what I know. It had started before I arrived, but the Congress, I think members still rely on some of the most professional staff and most talented staff that are available. But we have members now who didn't come here to watch. They came here to be part of the solution. So to your question, They want to get their hands into it. Anybody who wants to be involved in the process is invited into the process. And guess what? When you get done and you may not get everything you want, you may not be happy with everything in the bill, but when you have had a chance to actually weigh in and include ideas of yours, it makes for a much better result at the end.
Congressman, I think the reputation of Washington, D.C. so often is that nothing is getting done. So the fact that this bill was not only debated and finished by the deadline is a huge accomplishment and gives Americans confidence that the government is finally working for them again. But you mentioned the 11 committees. You mentioned a lot of different personalities and people from all parts of the country coming together to debate this. And you certainly held the line when it came to a bunch of truly terrible ideas, including letting some of the tax cuts expire, but not all of them. You walked away from that idea. There was also a floating of only allowing the tax cuts for certain people and job creators that then would have tax hikes through this bill to try and satisfy some of the arguments for more revenue to deal with the deficits. So talk about that and why you decided to hold the line on those issues and how you were able to make sure at the end, at the finish line, that tax hikes in no form were included in the bill.
Well, Katie, I've just always believed that you know how to spend your money much better than our government does. And when it comes to what we're trying to do with tax policy, I want people, personally, this is my view, not as the whip, just as a member, I want people to have more of their own money. Because if you're able to have more of your own hard-earned money, you're going to put that to work to improve your life. And by the way, if you're doing it to improve the life that you're leading and your family's life, you're most likely going to be lifting all boats at the same time. So the other piece of it is a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. Our government has way too much money already. I mean, the problem is we just do not manage it. We haven't for years, and this is why I'm just so grateful that the good Lord not only preserved but gave us Donald J. Trump for this 4 years, because it really is about punching this government right in the face and redesigning it, downsizing it, right-sizing it, make sure that it's more efficient, move it into the 21st century, get it back to maybe working for people again, instead of this idea that we're all working for our government. So no, you're not going to get me to move. I had members with this academic debate. I'm on the side of current policy baseline. I'm totally with it. Because what they would tell me is, all right, so our government says we're going to tax you this number, 100% of this. The lawmaker comes in and says, I think that's too high. We should do 50% of that. You know what my government does? My government books a 50% loss on money it never had and it didn't belong to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild. They make me pay for tax cuts, but they go and spend like drunken sailors and they don't have to find any pay for us for that. So, and the other thing I had somebody say to me, Katie, it's going to take 9 years to pay for these tax cuts. After they condescended to me and told me that I was smarter than that, I sounded, and I told them, you know, you're right. I'm just a Midwestern kid, not all that bright. But what you just said to me, it's going to take my government 9 years to spend what it wants to spend today, and I'm saying no.
I hate the term pay for.
Oh.
I'm so glad that you articulated it that way.
On tax cuts.
On tax cuts,
tax cuts.
yes, on tax cuts. This bill obviously also prevented the largest tax cut or tax hike in history. Guy talked about how your fellow lawmakers said we have to get this done. There's no question that this is we have to do this. There's no choice. When it comes to it being passed now, what kind of confidence does this give Americans who already own small businesses, big businesses, or maybe entrepreneurs who are looking at the regulations and the amount of money they pay the federal government and what they can now do as a result of knowing that they're going to keep the money that they've earned?
Well, first off, let's tee it up this way, because people are attacking this in the lamestream media. They are attacking this as, oh, it's not that popular, right? Okay, maybe as it's named, because all they've done is attack the big, beautiful bill. But when you piece it apart and you show people what's in it, no taxes on tips. It knocks it off out of the park. No taxes on Social Security. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, making it permanent. I mean, when you take these out, they're incredibly popular. Work requirements. Work requirements. What a novel concept. We're going to incent able-bodied, working-aged adults to get back into the workforce. Incredibly popular with Republicans, Democrats, and others. here's what I'm going to predict for you, Katie. The Obamacare and the wrongly named Inflation Reduction Act were incredibly popular when they were passed because this left-wing, celebration media that tells us this is great, they were very popular when they got passed. And then 6 to 12 months later, there was serious buyer's remorse because the American public figured out they did not deliver on the promises that were made. In fact, they made it worse. I'm here to predict to you that this bill, because what it's going to do for business in this country, for people, that tax increase in my district for the average family of 4 would have been about a $19,000 increase per family. That's insane. The business issue is what I think is so important. The 100% expensing, all the stuff that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act created. We've got a good economy, but we could have a great economy. And this is why Donald Trump talks about the golden age. What we passed allows the money that has been sitting on the sidelines, and those of you that have businesses that are members of Americans for Prosperity, those of you that have businesses that have been waiting, well, I don't know if I want to make that investment yet. I don't know if I want to expand and buy this $1 million machine. Well, guess what? That money is now coming off the sidelines. It'll probably take us 6, 12 months, maybe a little bit more, to have the full impact of it being felt. But that's why it was so important that this get done now, because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was not signed into law until December of 2017. Then the full force and effect of that did not really hit until after the 2018 midterms. This time, we did it before July 4th. I think you're going to be seeing it next summer.
Just one more follow-up on that. You heard a lot from what you call the lamestream media about how this only benefits the rich. Can you talk about whether that's an accurate statement or not?
It's not even close. I mean, you just got to roll your eyes. These guys got to understand that 2017 is calling and they want their argument back. This is what you were screaming about in 2017, and it wasn't true then,
right,
and it isn't true now. I mean, in fact, now it's even less of an argument, but again, present company excluded, our media in this country is worthless because they are not doing the job of holding people accountable. I said present company excluded. When you look at some of these long-time news networks, they don't take this apart and explain to the public that, well, wait a second, we're not cutting anything. This has been the tax policy for the last 7 years. So no, this is going to benefit. And by the way, I actually laughed as somebody asked me that question. Isn't it true that you're just cutting taxes for the rich? I said, no taxes on tips. Yeah, those people are rich. No taxes on overtime. I wonder why they're working overtime. They must be rich. This is for the working men and women. This is for the small businesses that are looking to be tomorrow's big businesses. This is exactly what this country needs. And we've seen it before, but this time you see a president who had a little time to look at his last experience and what we were living through, and he has shown up with a plan, and because of the American public, he's got a Congress that is happy to put his plan into operation.
One last very quick question for you. I want to bring the voice of the American people in here. Can you had to work through the entire conference as whip. Can you say something about how the impact that American voices have when people are calling into their members' offices and the things that you heard from members throughout this process?
Well, first off, you cannot underestimate two things. One, your voice with a member or members, and two, your face. Putting yourself in front of them, because a lot of people actually make the sacrifice to come out here and get an audience with some of these members. Putting a face with the issues that are most important to the people that are in front of them makes a huge difference. And I will tell you, I talked to a group at lunch which included, I think AFP was in the room, and I thanked them, because without you, we never would have gotten this done. And this was literally a team effort. Yeah, people have election certificates and have to vote, but remember, as one of them said to me today, I'm a lobbyist for 700,000 people back in my state. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, yeah. But our job is to listen to those people, and organizations like AFP and all the others that were at lunch, amplify that voice. Make it important. By the way, make it very personal. Mm-hmm. because you've got real life stories of people saying, with this bill, I'm going to be able to hire more employees because I'm going to be able to expand my manufacturing business. I can grow and help my community, which in turn helps my state, which ultimately helps the United States of America.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And on behalf of Minnesotans everywhere, thank you for beating the stereotype and proving that Minnesotans are not boring or milquetoast. All right. Thank you very much to the Majority Whip.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we are going to move across to the other side of the Capitol and welcome the whip counter from the Senate side, Senator John Baraso. Hello, good to see you again.
Senator, great to see you.
Emily?
Good to see you.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And so let's rewind. There are so many key moments over the course of this debate and the process, but let's rewind to the moment that the House initially passes their version of the bill. Now this hot potato is in your lap and your colleague's lap, and it's like, all right, the House is saying, we did our job, good luck. What was the thought process of trying to put that famous Senate stamp on something without jeopardizing its ability to be passed back in the U.S. House if you guys were able to get the job done, which of course you did? Talk about those considerations, if you would.
Well, you're absolutely right, and thanks so much for the incredible job you've done over the last year, all of you. Tom Emmer, don't you think he'd be a great United States Senator? Because you talk about his common sensibilities. I'm part of the recruiting team. Minnesota, there's an open seat there. Don't you think he'd be terrific? We'd love to have him. Just terrific. And he had been meeting with, I'd had him come in to see our whip team even before they were able to pass it in the House. The Speaker was coming to the Senate, our lunches. He said, we expect you're going to want to put your thumbprint on it a little bit, but make sure that we recognize it when you send it back to the House. And we were so happy that they were able to pass it. Nothing was easy along the whole process. When the Speaker of the House came to see us one day, he said it was like walking across on a tightrope across the Grand Canyon, on not really a tightrope, but on dental floss. And I said, and in a windstorm. I mean, it was just nothing was easy when your margins are that tight. And we said, we need to get this done, and we need to make sure that we do it in the right way. There were some things that we wanted to do differently than what the House did. And I think one of the key issues that we were able to solve and do in the Senate, and then the House picked it up, was make these tax cuts permanent. They did for 4 or 5 years. We needed to make them permanent, and with the rules and the pay-fors and those sorts of things, it was a more expensive lift and a harder lift in the Senate. We just thought, though, in terms of giving the American people the knowledge that they weren't going to have to be back through this again. Are we facing a $4 trillion tax increase? If we could make it permanent, it would give the certainty to families, to small businesses, so that the investments would be made, and this would really improve the economy in a big way. So there were a couple things we wanted to do differently, and the senators said, we need to cut even more money than was cut in the House bill. Said, this is maybe our one opportunity. And we've been meeting for over a year on this. And for those of you who were at the National Convention in Milwaukee last summer, we had meetings with the Senate Finance Committee and talking to other folks that were there and saying, okay, we're meeting already. We want to make sure we have your best ideas.
That was a year ago this week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right now.
We want to make sure we have your best ideas because we believe we're going to take the House, we're going to take the Senate, and President Trump is going to get reelected. So we want to know your best ideas, and permanence for the tax code was part of a big thing that we said that will really make a difference for the economy long term. It didn't come over from the House that way, and that was one of the differences we knew we had to incorporate to have the best impact on families all across the country.
One follow-up on the closeness of the margins, and it's a question that could have gone to your counterpart in the House as well, but as someone whose job is to count the votes, is there some truth to this almost counterintuitive idea that the closeness of the margin in some ways helps? Because there's not time for nonsense. It's like we can't afford too many people to drop off, or is that not true in your experience?
Well, I don't think it's true, because you remember when Joe Manchin was the most powerful Joe in Washington during the Biden administration, because it was a 50-50 Senate, and he went one way or he went the other way, and it gave him incredible amounts of power. I am so thankful for all of your help to give us 53 in the United States Senate. If you're the whip, I would have loved to have more than that, but when you took out, when McCormick came in and took out Casey in Pennsylvania to be number 53, that was dramatic. Bernie Moreno, who's now part of my whip team from Ohio, for him to take out Sherrod Brown. That was a really, really thing. And then you're having Sheehy, I think, later today, for him to take out Tester, 18 years in the United States. Each of those three were 18 years. That's what took us 50 to 51 to 52 to 53, and it's through all of your help that put us there. And if you're the whip, you really are happy to have
And you need every
53.
single one of those votes.
We
too.
did. And because the vice president came in to break a tie in the final passage.
Senator, you've seen a lot of tough fights in the Senate. This was a big one, especially given how extensive the bill was. Was there a breakthrough moment when you knew that things were coming together? I know you talk about the planning and being in Milwaukee a year ago, but was there a time in the last couple of months or even the weeks leading up to the final passage in the Senate where you said, okay, this is going to be fine? Or were you not biting your nails up until the very end?
Well, if you, being from Wyoming, we heard the Minnesota stories, I think of things in terms of a rodeo, and there was a lot.
I love the rodeo. I'm from Arizona.
There was bull riding
Yep.
in this, and there was some team roping. There was steer wrestling. You had all of these.
Was there any
events.
mutton busting? That?
That would have been the easy part. This was the real. This was the real. And if you're movie buffs, this was Indiana Jones. I mean, just when you escaped the rolling boulder, then then the burning oil was coming at you, and then the scorpions, and then the snakes. So every time you thought we're there, you realized you weren't. I mean, the Vottorama, they don't have to have a Vottorama in the House, where the Democrats can keep throwing. We went 27 hours straight. We thought, if we start in the morning, maybe we could get done in a reasonable hour. It went all the way through the night until noon the next day. Started at 9 a.m. And you have Chuck Grassley, 91 years old, and he's fitter than most.
I
But
know.
there's still a lot of wear and tear on all of the members. So
Yeah.
to keep on going and to continue to work and persevere, we were able to get it done, and so happy to have President Trump sign it.
So Washington, D.C., the government loves money, and that's why it was proposed that maybe these tax cuts weren't fully extended permanently, that there would be some temporary decision here. What was your strategy to make sure that in the final passage these tax cuts were permanent?
Well, the people in the Finance Committee have been talking about this for over a year. Mike Crapo is chair, Steve Daines was talking about it regularly, and we were meeting, we must have had 50 different meetings of the Finance Committee, Republicans, to talk about what were our highest priorities. And the number one priority of the members of the committee was actually permanence, because we felt that gave folks the certainty. There were a number of very popular proposals, and Tom Emmer just talked about those, that matter to folks at home, and I think were really vote getters to help President Trump win all of these battleground states. I was out there during all the elections in the fall. There were 7 battleground states. Trump won all 7 of them. We only picked up 3 of those Senate seats. We didn't win Nevada or
Michigan.
Arizona or Michigan or Wisconsin. And they were all close, but President Trump won all of those by a slim margin, but he won them all.
Yeah.
So that was the difference in the promises that he made, which I think were big vote getters. And we talked the story about talking to the waitress at the restaurant in Nevada and Las Vegas and said, this tax on tips is tough.
Yeah.
And he talked about that, no tax on Social Security, and people that are working overtime and saying, they need me, I have an opportunity to make more money in overtime, but the taxes just eat up so much of the extra wages that I get that it's not worth doing. So, he had the perceptive to say, yes, we can make this better for all of these people, this broad group of people, who I think many of them voted for him as well. So that really helped get those folks, and he wanted to keep his promise, as he did, to those vote getters. And those of us who've been waiting a long time realized the certainty and the permanence of the tax cuts made a big difference as well to really stimulate the economy.
So I'm sure that you would like to take a breather, but the Senate's work is not done. Do you want to talk about the rescissions package that's being voted on Friday? Give us a preview about how that process is going.
Well, the deadline to get it to the president is Friday. We're continuing to work on that. We should have a vote on it this evening to start the process, but it's another Vottorama. Now, people, oh my God.
What is the rescissions package for people who maybe aren't familiar with what
the
it
White
is?
House has said, as we've all said, the government is too big and it spends too much. And when you take a look at this list that DOJ came out with of so many of the different ways that money is spent and wasted, where agencies of government take money that's appropriated and then dole it out in ways that are things you wouldn't think you would want to do.
Yeah.
Like vegan programs.
Illegal
Zambia.
immigration.
Well, those are big, but electric buses in some one country in Africa, a vegan program in another, a transgender program in another nation. All of these things. Why is our taxpayer dollars going to do those things? People don't want to see their tax dollars, and when they see the list, they say this is wrong. So the White House has put together a list and say we're going to pull back money that has already been appropriated, and we don't like the way it's being spent, and we have an opportunity with 50 votes to pull it back if the White House offers it, but it has to be done in a short period of time, and that deadline, the clock is ticking, and that's Friday.
Okay, great. Good to
Senator,
hear.
before we move on to another question, I want to acknowledge somebody very important in the room, Sarah Rust, from Cheyenne, Wyoming. She's one of our newer grassroots engagement directors. I don't know if you guys had a chance to meet before the event or not. Sarah, raise your hand.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the job you
So-
got. I mean, they were at the Wyoming Mining Association. They were out around at the county fairs. Tyler Lindholm was out and about. And he's hard to miss. He's about 6'6",
I
and
know,
then he has a
I
big
know.
cowboy hat on top
I
of his
know.
head. And
Well, for
his
folks,
kids are even better than he is. I mean, this is a great family.
yeah, wonderful. For the grassroots engagement directors for Americans for Prosperity are the engine that powers everything that we do, and they are our leaders on the ground. Sarah's one of our newer ones, but she hit the ground running. She hosted 20 events across the Cowboy State in support of the work that you were doing on the One Big Beautiful Bill. I just wanted to acknowledge her and offer a round of applause. Thank you. So, we've been talking about the path to passage of the bill. Now we've got to make sure that Americans understand how good this package was. And so you guys had a long conversation about the importance of making sure that there was permanency in the Senate version of the bill. As you go back to Wyoming and you talk to folks there, how are you seeing them start to take that certainty and that permanency and start to think about how they're going to invest it in your home state?
Because, and I was on Meet the Press talking about this just on Sunday, with the idea that we ran for office to try to make the country safer and more prosperous. Yeah. So we have this comprehensive economic plan to do just that. And the president has been upfront and talking about it because of what it's going to do to put more money in people's pockets. So Tim Scott, who's the chairman of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, said, every time we talk to a group, we ought to say, because of the beautiful big bill, you're not going to be hit with a $2,000 tax increase this year. Because of this bill, no tax on tips, Social Security, no tax on overtime. Because of this bill, we're going to have a secure border. So if we're worried about community safety, we're not going to have this flow of illegal immigrants. Because of the bill, our military is going to continue to show the kind of strength that we've been showing of peace through strength. So you go through this. Because of this, we're being able to explore for more American energy. So you're drilling for more oil in this country. Gas prices come down, electricity prices come down. More money in your pockets, more money for you to decide what you want to spend, how you want to, if you want to invest it or use it for retirement, groceries, gas, any of those things. Because of the bill, this, that, and the next thing. Because of the bill, we have saved and strengthened Medicaid for the people who really need it. And unless we talk about it in those terms, the Democrats are going to define it, they're going to try to do it in a bad way that we know isn't true. But until the people see the impact on them and their lives, we need to connect all the good things they're seeing in their lives and in their communities and at home and in their tax returns and in child tax credits, because there's so much in this bill that they need to see that. And that's our message to our members. When you talk to groups, explain to them, because of the bill, this good thing is happening in your community or to you.
A lot has been made of the tax portions in the bill, the Medicaid portions in the bill, but you brought up energy. A huge issue out west, right? What do you wish people understood more about what was in this bill from an energy perspective?
Well, it's going to make energy cheaper in America, and these are good jobs. Biden told his EPA to prioritize climate over energy that's available, affordable, reliable. So what did we get as a result? Gas prices at $5 a gallon around the country, $7 a gallon in California. They lost the election because they were the party of open borders and high prices. And energy was a big part of that. So then they drew down the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, making us even more vulnerable to enemies to try to get gas prices down. They rejected the idea of actually producing more energy at home. So the American people ultimately rejected their view. We had the Secretary of Energy in Wyoming on Friday for the ribbon cutting of a new mine for coal as well as critical elements. First time in 70 years there's a new mine for critical elements. We're so dependent on China for that as well. So the energy component of it is also about national security. Energy security is national security, but also less dependence on China for things like these critical elements that are a part of everything we do, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's a starter on your washing machine, whatever. All of those things have critical elements involved, and we need to bring that manufacturing back home.
As one follow-up on the Medicaid point, because it struck me that was one of their biggest attack lines, critics of the bill, the Democrats, the media, basically saying in some cases, this is going to kill people. Republicans don't care about poor people in their health care. They don't care about rural hospitals. I'm like, okay, well, we're talking here with a doctor from a rural state. I can imagine you take some of those attacks personally. And I wonder what your response is when you hear them over and over again.
Yeah, and I'm known by many as Wyoming's doctor, because for years I've been on television there doing television health reports. And so people know me. I've operated on more Medicaid patients and taken care of more Medicaid patients than probably every Democrat in Congress combined. And I know we need to save and strengthen Medicaid, and we've done it in this bill. So it's there for the people it's designed for, and it's supposed to be helping. And we know who those folks are. I mean, they're pregnant women, poor children, the disabled. That's who Medicaid was set up for. This is now you have 1.2 million illegal immigrants getting on Medicaid. Now they say, well, it's illegal to give it to them. But New York, California, Illinois, they've set up money laundering schemes where they're siphoning money out of the federal treasury that they flip through Medicaid, from the Medicaid fund to pay for health care for illegal immigrants. So you have 1.2 million illegal immigrants on Medicaid. We think there ought to be work requirements. You have over 5 million people who are working age, healthy individuals who choose not to work but are on Medicaid. We have very modest requirements for working to be able to stay on Medicaid. I think it's better if somebody has a job. It's important for their identity, their self-worth, the way they see each other, they see themselves and the family sees them. And if they're going to get government subsidies or something like Medicaid and health care, then they ought to be working and contributing, either volunteering. There's a number of different ways you do it. These are modest requests. Democrats during our Vottorama voted, nope, no work requirements, nope, keep giving it to illegal immigrants. And that is just going to blow up the whole, Medicaid's not going to be able to be sustainable. Funding for Medicaid is going to continue to go up, but just not as fast as the Democrats would like it to go up.
Well, Democrats also voted against the fund, correct, for rural hospitals that was put into the bill at the end.
Which was a $50 billion stabilization fund for rural hospitals. I mean, if a rural hospital in a community closes, harder to recruit, not just doctors, but also teachers, small businesses, that's really hard on that community. And over the last dozen or so years, most of the hospitals that closed in the country were small community rural hospitals. So we need to keep them open, and that's what this $50 billion stabilization fund is intended to do, which is much more targeted, much more to help those rural communities than would just be making Medicaid even more sustainable, or more unsustainable.
Well, Senator, we'll let you get back to working on the rescissions package next. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for your leadership throughout this process. Really appreciate your partnership.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily.
Good to see you. Good luck at the rodeo.
And we are excited to now welcome his colleague, Senator Tim Sheehy.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you.
You too.
How's it going?
Hey, thanks for being here.
Well, Senator, I was just in your state a couple weeks ago. Beautiful, beautiful place. And there's a room filled with patriots and conservatives. And I think the biggest applause line that I got was someone had asked me, do you feel like in Pennsylvania that was the biggest upgrade in the Senate between 2024 and 2025? I said, it's definitely up there, but I think the retirement of what I have always called, I've called him Chuck Schumer with a flat top haircut, was actually probably number one, and that got a big response from your voters out in Montana. And to that point, you're brand new to the process. So terms like Vottorama get thrown around, and that sounds potentially fun. Ooh, Vottorama, wow. And then you go through one, and it seems a little less fun. What was that like, your initiation into that insane spectacle?
Why the hell did I do this? Like you said, you left Montana. I was there Sunday. I look at beautiful purple mountains. My kids riding horses on our ranch in front of me, and I'm like, I got to get on a plane and go to D.C. tomorrow. Like, what am I thinking? But now the truth is, our republic is messy. Self-rule is messy. Self-government has always been messy. If you want clean and you want orderly and you want a process that is quick with no faults, go to an authoritarian dictatorship. But you want messy, you want dirty, you want to see how the sausage made. Look at self-rule. Going back to Athens and every self-governing country since then, it's hard, it's messy, it's nasty. But therein lies the beauty, because that's how we as humans figure out how we're going to make policies that respond to the will of the people. And I think one lesson I learned in business is when you walk out of a business deal, if everyone's pissed off, it was probably a fair deal. And at the end of Vottoramama, everyone's pissed off. So you know what? It was probably fair.
And very
Probably
timely.
wasn't perfect, but it was probably fair.
There have been, and we touched a bit on one of them or two of them with our previous conversations here. There have been so many attacks, slings and arrows against the process, against the substance of now, we keep calling it the Big Beautiful Bill. It's the Big Beautiful Law now, thank goodness. Which of those attacks has bothered you the most? Because, you know, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, he went on that very long speech and he said a lot of things that frankly weren't true, but he was channeling this attack machine. And you've been right in the grinder of that attack machine. Given the crowd that's watching this and people who have really put blood, sweat, and tears into the process, what has bothered you the most? And with the opportunity to correct the record on something, what would that be?
Well, I mean, I learned a lot of things during the campaign. I never run for anything before in my life. So when they came to me and proposed running for this, to be honest, I had no idea what I was getting into. You know, I'm like, it's like a Montana Senate seat. I didn't realize this was going to be like, you know, Omaha Beach of the 24 election cycle. You know, most expensive race in American history per vote. But what I learned, I'm like, why the hell are these people coming after me? Like, I'm a family man. I fought for this country. I give millions to charity. Like, I'm a good guy. Like, they can disagree with it. Why are they trying to destroy me? And where I'm going with this, what I realized was, and Ryan Zinke told me this, who pinned my Purple Heart on me back when I was a SEAL, so I've known him for years. He said, if they're shooting at you, it's because you're over the target. And I internalized that, and there was a painting I looked at every day. I'm actually having commissioned to do an actual painting. It was a picture that, you know, American dive bomber heading towards a Japanese aircraft carrier from the pilot's perspective. And all the flak and all the anti-aircraft fire was headed at that plane. Because when you're on a ship in World War II and the dive bomber's coming, you're not shooting at the planes to the side, you're shooting at the one that's coming right for the ship. Because you can see what plane is heading directly for the target, and when he drops that bomb, you know it's going to hit your ship and blow you up. So the captain of the ship directs all weapons at the one plane that's coming for the ship. And, you know, they saw me coming in the election, and they directed all fire. The One Big Beautiful Bill, I think what they saw was this delivered on every single campaign promise that, frankly, Trump had been running on since 2015. I mean, this was no sneak attack. That every policy in this bill had been talked about ad nauseum at every single Trump rally from coast to coast for 10 years. It had been talked about by every Republican candidate ad nauseum. And I think therein lied their fear of it, which was this was the final, not the final, but this was a very crystallized realization of promises made, promises kept. And they knew that if this passed, this was going to be very bad for them politically. Because if it passed, it would prove that lower taxes on American businesses are a good thing and unleash growth. A secure border is what 80% of Americans want. That deporting illegals and criminals from this country is what Americans want. That's what mothers want, safe streets. And this entire bill encapsulated common sense, which is Americans want a secure border, safe streets, cheap cops are good, criminals are bad, boys are boys, girls are girls. And people are sick and tired of the lunacy, and this bill really was the first salvo of saying common sense is back. We won the election, and now we're delivering on everything that we said we would. And I think what was most interesting to me during this process was we were at NRSC one day at an event, and Tim Scott showed some polling about the One Big Beautiful Bill, and every single provision on a standalone basis in that bill polled fantastically well. Like, I'm talking 70% in many cases, like securing the border, deporting illegals, making equipment expensing permanent, making Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, child tax credit, reducing fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicaid. I mean, you ask people about what the bill was actually doing across party lines, like 70+% of Americans are like, yeah, that's good, we want that. But then as soon as you asked them, what's your opinion of the Big Beautiful Bill, it was basically a party line response. So I think the attacks on it for me, they never really bothered me because what it was the indications of a failing party with no message and no messenger who were simply lashing out at something that they knew was going to be political doom for them.
So to quote Senator Baraso, this was basically your first rodeo
Yeah.
in Washington on the Vottorama. But you fought for provisions that matter deeply to your state, and you
Right.
worked closely with the White House and leadership to do that, and fought against provisions that were originally in the Senate version, like public lands, for example, being sold off. We share the love of outdoors as Westerners.
Yeah.
How did you get to that process of working so closely with leadership and the White House, given you're new to town? And also, what provisions that you fought for do you think that Montanans or constituents will feel the effects of first?
Well, again, as you said, I'm new here, so learning the ropes, and I think, I don't plan on spending my whole life here, so I plan on spending however many years I'm here. I want to be impactful and make a difference. So although I may be new, I'm not going to be a backbencher and watch a process unfold that I think is going to be bad for the country or bad for my state. And I think that's why the public lands piece became very important. I mean, listen, there is a process to dispose of public lands. There is a time and place that, all right, communities have to look at checkerboard parcels, say, hey, why do we have inholdings here? This is not, like, we need to sort this out. BLM should transfer to Forest Service and sell this to that and reorganize this. There's a time and place for that. We have a process for it. But for me, what I tried to do with the conference writ large, but also with our constituents, was say, guys, first and foremost, this is a tax bill, all right? I know we all want to put all of our priorities into this, but the number one purpose for the Big Beautiful Bill is to make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 2017 permanent. Let's not add provisions that will endanger that. As a former military officer, it's about accomplishing the mission. What's the mission? Our mission is to go here to this village and capture this bad guy and bring him home for interrogation. Our mission is not to blow up this house or shoot that guy or shoot. The ideal is get in and out quietly so no one ever knows we were there. And I think for this bill, how to keep people focused. Whenever you have a big piece of legislation that's landmark, everyone wants their priorities attached to it. And they start throwing riders on that threaten the viability of the core mission, which is make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 2017 permanent.
Right.
And I think everything we tried to do to it that make it more complicated was going to threaten that. And of course, we had to raise the debt ceiling, we had to fix the border stuff. But I think we had to focus on the priorities of the bill and keep it as lean as possible and get it through the process, which is what we did. So the public lands piece, I thought, was becoming a political albatross. It was also something that our voters made very clear in the state they didn't support, and there wasn't really an option for a lot of us to kind of stand up and say, listen, there's a process for this. Let's do this in a separate bill later. This is confusing the mission here, which is passing TCGA 2017 into permanence.
Yeah. Tax cuts were certainly the priority.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of talk about deficits and debt. There wasn't enough talk, I would say, about growth. One of the ways to get economic growth, especially out west, is through energy production. So can you talk about how this bill
100%.
Enables the Trump energy production agenda?
One, I think...
And why that would lower prices and benefit the economy.
Yeah, 100%. And additionally, I think it's important, equipment expensing for ag states especially, and of course for energy development. Any project or company that requires heavy equipment, to be able to expense that is critical. I mean, that's hugely important. And having a stable, also R&D expensing, the ability to expense R&D if you're experimenting with new technology or new techniques as well. So unleashing the resource economy is critical for not just our national security, but it's also critical for economic growth. I mean, we're going to see, our demand for baseload power has essentially been stable for the last 20 years. I mean, slight uptick, but adjusted for population, we've basically had static power need in America for the last 20 years. We are projected to quadruple, if not more, in the next 20 years, our need for baseload electricity. And it's weird, I was just talking to the American Coal Council earlier, possibly our most impactful profession to determine whether we win the AI race and win the crypto race isn't coders and nerds, it's coal miners.
Yeah, it's true.
It's having enough electricity to fuel and power the data centers, power quantum computing, power our crypto mines. So the most important, it's funny how things come full circle. You know, America used to be a blue collar nation, and for the last 30 years, it's been all about like the nerds in skinny jeans and t-shirts in Silicon Valley coding. But now it's gonna be about the burly coal miners again, because we need enough electricity to power the data centers. So unleashing the American resource economy is key, and that's not just electricity, obviously fossil fuels, natural gas, coal.
Nuclear.
It also means, 100%.
Nuclear.
Also means timber. I mean, wood. We're dealing with a housing crisis still to this day. And part of the reason is we can't cut down trees in America anymore.
Right.
I mean, the Forest Service used to harvest 13 million board feet a year 35 years ago. Now their staff is 3 times as big, and we harvest 2 million board feet a year. And timber is the primary component of home building. And instead of making timber in America with American jobs, we buy timber from Canada and give Canada the job. So I think our resource economy writ large, obviously energy is the most important part of that, but from mining, you know, rare earth minerals, lithium, copper, we have to bring back the resource economy. We've made mining and extraction of critical resources impossible in this country, so we buy it from other countries who don't mine it cleanly. They have kids in pits with shovels carrying it out on top of their head, so American liberals feel good about themselves while they drive their EV. Like, let's just be honest.
true.
You are shifting your responsibility to Africa and Asia because you don't want to pretend. You want to pretend like we don't mind bad things in America. You go to a mine in America, it's high tech, it's automated. You have workers there who are safe, it's clean, and we're not dumping cyanide into the river. You go to a mine in other parts of the world, you see 9-year-old kids covered in chemicals carrying stuff out literally on their heads.
Yeah.
So we need to
Progress,
bring.
they would call that.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, human rights, as they would say.
Yep.
Speaking of human rights and child labor, of course, this bill, again, was very focused on economic growth and preventing the largest tax hike in American history. But border security
In the history
was,
of mankind.
in the history of mankind.
I mean, literally, $4 trillion.
Since the beginning of money.
Yeah.
So can you explain why it was so important? It's so important to have border security connected to the economic growth and benefits in this bill, both on the northern and southern border, and also in terms of interior enforcement, and how that affects Americans economically inside their small towns or big cities?
Yeah, border security is national security is economic security. I mean, I learned a lot about the intertwined nature of economic and security, social fabric of a community, and national security. Serving overseas during the wars. When you're trying to stabilize a region, you realize that job opportunities, that economic growth, the ability for people to buy food in a mercantile environment, having an actual economy that exists where there's currency that's respected and there's rule of law, it's very hard to have economic growth if you don't have security and safety in a stable community. And obviously you can't have a stable community if you have millions upon millions of people flowing in illegally every single year, operating in a shadow economy. So I think securing the border wasn't just a national security priority; it was a direct, also economic security priority as well. And it's amazing, I think, to hear some of the criticism. At first it was we have an obligation to let everyone into this country. It's our moral obligation. Now it's, well, who's going to make our cheap stuff if we don't have basically immigrant slave labor here? Like that's the argument, which is if we don't have people here illegally to work for $1 an hour, then we're not going to have, who's going to pick our food? It's like, really? Like that's your argument?
Or in the word of Gavin Newsom, right? Who will make the children work at the marijuana farms?
Yeah.
Illegally. Yeah.
Exactly. So
That's where we are.
I think it's absolutely critical that a secure border and all the things that go with that, which are part of this bill. So I think you couched it very well that this bill was about economic growth, setting the stage for that. And again, the most important thing for that is predictability. Businesses want to know there's a predictable horizon for investment from a regulatory perspective, from a tax code perspective, from a border perspective. Because if they're plopping a business down somewhere around the country, the nature of that workforce and the safety of their workforce in those communities is a huge concern. And we see companies picking up and moving out of cities because they're like, our staff doesn't feel safe here. Like we're going from Seattle or LA, we're going to go to Texas or Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, how many companies you've heard about in the last few years do that? And they're literally like, well, we're tired of hobos shitting on our front step. Literally.
That's
They're like,
old.
yeah, like we're tired of that. Our staff is tired of being assaulted by homeless people on the way to work. So we are now moving to the other side of the country because we're tired of that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just limit itself to companies.
Yeah, as a radio host, I had a brief moment of panic there because we have something called the dump button. There are certain words that cannot be said on the air, but we're among friends not regulated by the FCC at all. So thank you for that colorful illustration of some of our urban problems in the country that I agree with.
I saw you tense up.
Yeah, I was like,
Well, I call it like it is. I don't speak like a politician yet. I guess we'll see it in 5 years.
Well, actually, you don't.
you'll say defecate.
Or a
Way back
radio
to
host,
defecate.
for that matter.
And you don't, and it's a breath of fresh air, actually, and it's the question that I want to ask you. But before I do, we're thrilled to have so many of our grassroots leaders here with us in the room today. But I want to, none of them are from Montana, because our Montana team is right now in the state planning out the rest of this year and through 2026 in a retreat. But I wanted to say hello virtually to Luke Campton, who's in Great Falls. So a lot of people focus on like door knock numbers and phone call numbers and whatever, but one of the most impactful things that we've found for folks who maybe don't want to make phone calls or don't want to knock on doors, they can get people to send postcards to lawmakers with their personalized stories. And it gets attention, right? The emails just go into the email inbox. Sometimes with the postcards, people have to process them and respond to them and all of that kind of stuff. This guy empowered his community, I should say that way, to send 1,200 postcards to support your position on this bill throughout the process. So thank you so much for your work up in Montana.
Yes, thanks.
And so now back to how you don't talk like a politician. I've actually been struck listening to the conversation here about how easily you're able to talk about the position, the feeling, the perspective of a variety of different industry leaders or people in your state. You clearly listen to your community, you clearly listen to your constituents. What is your advice for other leaders on how they should engage their communities now to connect people to the value of this bill? How do you do that so well, and let's inject some of that back into the bones here in Washington.
Prioritize and execute. You know, some of the best leadership advice I got as a young officer going through training was, you know, you're always going to have more tasks than you have time to do as a leader in combat. That's just the nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be things you don't have. Like, you go to the Naval Academy where I went as a midshipman, in your plebe year, they intentionally give you more coursework than you can complete because they want to force you to say, what do I have to get done? Yeah. Knowing full well you're not going to get all yours. They tell you get everything done, but you know you can't. And I think we can't try to message on everything. And frankly, the criticism that he mentioned in the bill, a lot of this, they want to knock you off your message. They want to get you talking about Medicaid. They want to get you talking about you know, Social Security. They want to distract you. We got to stay focused on the mission. If we don't pass this bill, your taxes will go up 68% next year, the largest tax increase in the history of mankind. Like since the Babylonians, you know, were taking people's shekels. Like you have to pass this. If you don't, like, what do you think will happen to the economy if people's taxes go up by 68%? You know, farmers expensing their equipment, securing the border, which the vast majority of Americans want to have happen. So we've got to focus on the core mission. No bill's perfect. We're not, and we're not going to make everyone happy, and if you try, you'll always fail. So I think focus on the core piece of success. That's what I did with every constituency in the state that didn't like this part of the bill, that part of the bill. So great, do you want your taxes to go up by 68% next year? No. Yeah, me neither. So support the bill. All right, it's not perfect, but it's delivering on the most critical campaign promises. And obviously the fiscal hawks, which I consider myself one, you know, it didn't cut enough. But we're not done yet. I mean, we're literally starting on the rescissions package tonight. Mm-hmm. Like this wasn't, that was the other piece, was a lot of folks, well, it didn't do this, it didn't do that. Mm-hmm. Had to remind them, you know, we can't have an infant mortality here. If we try to have this bill do everything, it will fail. The core of this bill is the TCGA permanence and a few other things. The rest of this we can address later. We still have a year and a half left of total control. We can do other reconciliations.
At least.
Yes. Well, we always have to plan worst case. We have to plan we're going to lose something in 2 years. Hopefully we don't. We'll fight that we don't, but we have to plan we will. So we'll do more rescissions. We'll do another reconciliation. We'll have another bite at the budget. Mm-hmm. I mean, no one has ever cut as much government spending as this administration, this Congress has ever in the history of the country. And I think they deserve some credit for that. A lot of folks saying, oh, this increased the deficit. It increased the deficit because the CBO score was based on assumptions given to them by the Democrats. So the CBO score that was much touted that we're going to add $3.3 trillion to the deficit here assumed 1.8% economic growth over the next 10 years. Right. Anybody in this room know when the last time we had 1.8% economic growth over a decade was?
Under Obama. Just kidding.
Never in the history of the country have we had that low economic growth. So they baked in assumptions as well as a number of other ones. I won't go, I know we're running out of time. But the assumptions they gave were engineered to create a score that looked bad. So again, just keeping people focused on the core outcomes and not letting the message get distracted.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks for being here with us today. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
Katie. Amazing.
Oh, she is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, I was told that our final guest was not going to be here, but she is, which makes me very happy because Florida is in the house.
We are going to go out with a bang. We're going to go back to the House side. Congresswoman Kat Cammack, get on up here.
Pleasant surprise.
Hello. I'm just
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, very serious. Yes.
This is weird because literally they're all my friends, so I am so pregnant. Please excuse how this looks.
We're happy you're here.
Woo.
Thanks for making it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I'm 5'3" with T-Rex arms, so this is gonna happen a lot. Just,
I can do it too, it's okay.
oh man, the struggle is real. Whew. All right, Baby Peanut and I are ready.
I saw a microphone go off, and I was like, is it possible that the Congresswoman is here? Or should I call you a pregnant person? I don't know what we're supposed to call you
If
these
you call me
days.
a birthing person, I will escort you out of this building, sir.
So let's talk about the reason that we're in a celebratory mood. This was a lot of work.
Yes.
You and I talked about this on the air how many times?
Countless.
And it was sweat and bullets, right? Because it is a
Yes.
tough herding of cats sometimes in both chambers.
Yes.
And you were having sometimes these conversations, animated conversations on the floor in full view of cameras. Give us just a little flavor on what it was like really during crunch time. And was there a moment that you realized, oh, bleep, as the senator would actually say the word, we're going to do this. We're going to get this done for real.
Okay, so a couple things, yes. Since I'm pregnant, I have a perpetual sweat mustache. So instead of sweating bullets, it's just a sweat mustache. And it has been in full effect from the very beginning of the one big beautiful bill, as we call it. There have been so many moments that I have had to stop and really just kind of jot down a note so I can remember the moment of this is a key moment in survival or death of the bill as we know it today. And that happened in committee, it happened on the floor. There was so much back and forth because when you're dealing with a package of this size, there's so many areas where it can go wrong.
Yeah.
And trying to get it right with the personalities, and of course in Congress, everyone's a B type, right? Very, very easy-going people, that's facetious, I'm being facetious. That combined with the Senate and not knowing at that moment in time what was going to happen when we were dealing with it on our side, what the Senate was going to take, what they weren't going to take, and then of course you have the engagement with the White House. There were so many balls that we were juggling that at any moment it could fall apart. And so you have to keep that in the back of your mind of, I have really important priorities that I need to get in, that I want to get in, that my constituency needs, my state needs. But at the end, you're also looking at, this is what America as a whole needs. And so it's a lot of, it was an emotional roller coaster, I will say. We'll say an emotional roller coaster.
Second question that I have is this talking point. We've touched on it a bit with some of your colleagues, this argument that this is really just a giant giveaway to the rich, and Republicans only care about the rich and they don't care about anyone else. And I think about your personal background and how preposterous that must sound to your ears. Can you reflect on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I know that we have a literacy crisis in this country, and it's reflected every day in the people who call and say, this is a tax giveaway to billionaires. And I said, well, have you read the bill? Well, no, but I saw this such and such on TikTok, or I saw such and such on, Instagram, whatever it is. And I love these conversations because as someone who strives to be a practicing stoic, right, I try to ask questions and remain very zen and calm. And when you start asking people questions, they really show you who they are, because you can't get past one question with most of the people who claim that this is a tax giveaway for billionaires. And they reveal themselves to be completely uneducated about the bill, but also about basic civics and the economy as a whole. And so what we have done is we have invited every person who has ever called our office to come in and meet with me personally. Now, 9 times out of 10, they chicken out. But the ones that are like, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna tell her about all her billionaire friends, and I'm like, where? Where are these people?
I want some campaign donations.
I know,
That
I'm
would be
like,
great.
pray tell, who are these people, right? And so they come in and they start saying, you are taking X away from poor people to give to billionaires. And I said, here, can you just take a look at this graph for me? And I'll lay the graph out with all of the tax brackets. And I'll say, do you see where we are here? This is what happens if you don't pass this bill. It goes to here. This is the increase. Now, where on here do you see the billionaires? And they're like, well, they're not on this graph because you made this graph. I'm like, no. And I give them 8 different sources, and you walk them through it. And then they start talking about the other preposterous claim, which is that millions and millions of people are losing health care. And I'm like, no, they are not. If they were never eligible for the program, they choose not to work 18.5 hours a week, or they're in this country illegally. They were never entitled to these benefits anyway. And don't you care about pregnant people and people with disabilities? And don't you care about children? Why would you ever want someone who is perfectly able-bodied and is not ever supposed to be in this country to be receiving better benefits than someone who is an American citizen and has a disability? Why would you? I just think that's heartless. And you spin that on them, and I've had so many people tell me, well, how come no one explains it to me? Again, people, they go into situations reading a headline with a soundbite, and they think with their emotions, not with their head. And that is why it is so important, the work that AFP does, because it's about the facts, and it's about the people, and meeting people where they're at. And so going into communities and having this story to tell about why the bill is actually the key to unleashing abundance and prosperity in our communities, that is the most important thing.
Congresswoman, when you were hearing from your constituents, the stakeholders, the small business owners,
Yeah.
the single moms who benefit from this, what were their concerns if it didn't pass?
So for the small businesses, truthfully, they were absolutely terrified of the lack of certainty, right? Because when you're a business owner, you are the jack of all trades. You are customer service, your sales, your HR, you're all the things. And the last thing that you want to worry about is a environment where you're constantly wondering, when is someone going to pull the rug out from under me? How can I plan for this tax increase? Because you get to a point where you can only pass on the costs to your customers so many times before you're just out of business. And I would say the same thing for the regulatory regime, which is something entirely different that we're trying to tackle. But the long-term certainty of being able to say, hey, I know what the tax rate's going to be. I can plan for that. That was the most important thing, because there's a lot of uncertainty in the times that we're living in. And if that is something they can count on, that's one less worry for them.
Congresswoman, I know we're running over on this event, but I can't let you leave without introducing you to somebody very important who's here.
Oh, boy.
Morgan Forster. Can you raise your hand? Right over there.
Hello, Morgan.
So Morgan started with us in late February, and she's been organizing the Tampa area.
Nice.
50 volunteers already. They did thousands of voter contacts, 8 events in support of the passage of this bill.
Love that.
But I have to mention one thing in particular. Katie, you're going to love this too. She did an event that was a shotgun shooting event.
Oh, perfect.
Called Shooting Down Taxes. And that's the kind of creativity that really gets people's attention, and then you can have the conversations like you're talking about with them one-on-one to explain what's actually in this package. So thank you so much, Morgan, for all of your work.
Absolutely. Congratulations.
I know we need to wrap up in 30 seconds. Can you give us a preview of how you're thinking about what's next coming out of this package in terms of how to engage people on the benefits?
Oh, shit. Okay.
AFP event. This is a party. Okay, it's a big, beautiful bash.
You all knew what you were getting when you put me on this stage. Okay, I'm not sure I can do it in 30 seconds, but we are going to be in overdrive. Sorry.
No,
We're
guys,
gonna
so
be. I know.
red.
Is there a dump button or something? Guy, where's your dump button?
Oh, I know. I'm having heart palpitations.
He's red.
Let's go.
He's like, to hell with it. So in the next foreseeable future, everything has to be about engaging with people, one, where they're at, and getting to people with a message that resonates. I think back to a former vice presidential candidate who once gave a PowerPoint presentation in Ocala, Florida, in 99-degree weather, and all of us wanted to absolutely melt and die. And I think of that as a very bad example of what, a good example of what not to do. So we need to do things that are creative, like what Morgan did, putting together a shooting event, make it fun, make it accessible, make it real. And we have to be driving the narrative. This constant defense that we are playing of shooting down these false accusations, you can only do that for so long. So we have to be on the offense, and we need to do it in a lot of different creative ways.
Got it. Will do. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
John, can I help you down? All right, well, that does it for us. And I was actually reflecting on this. This was my third conversation in this space, at this place, with members of leadership building up to passage of this bill. And all the questions for the first two were, is this actually going to happen? So what a relief and what a pleasure that here we are to actually celebrate something that has been achieved. Katie, I know this is your second time doing a conversation like
Thank
this.
you, AFP.
Clearly, by far the most delightfully profane of any of my conversations has been here tonight. I just want to thank everyone who was part of those conversations, including the speaker, including Leader Scalise, including Congresswoman, I think, who else was here? McClain was
Lisa
here.
McClain,
Yep.
yes.
And then, of course, all of our guests here today. I think it's also absolutely crucial, and Emily, you've done this so, I think, seamlessly throughout the event, thanking not just individuals for what they've done, but thanking every single person. Those were just a few examples of the effort that has been put forth by this organization. We talk about the Grassroots Army. The Grassroots Army flexed its muscle in a huge way on this bill, and I think there are fingerprints of AFP and the membership and the volunteers all over, hopefully what will be a really strong outcome from this for the American people. So I think there's a lot of congratulations to go around beyond just the elected leaders that we mentioned. But the job isn't done. And there are so many outstanding projects when it comes to fiscal sanity that I always feel like a weird nerd talking about, but I feel like I'm in good company whenever I'm here because you guys are going to be striving to do that moving forward. I know we have a lot to look forward to as an organization, as a country. We turn 250 years old next year. More to come on that. And if anyone out there is not yet actively engaged with AFP, you can fix that immediately. Go to afpvolunteer.com. Emily, thank you for having us. Katie, always great to see you.
Pleasure to be with all
Thank
of
you
you.
all for
Thank
being
you.
here as well, and have a great night.
Thank you.